In the dim glow of a small town's community theater, where faded red curtains hung like weary eyelids and the air smelled of polished wood and forgotten dreams, young Elias stepped onto the stage for the first time. He was just 12, with tousled brown hair that fell over eyes too old for his face, carrying the weight of a world that had already taken too much from him. His sneakers, scuffed and tied with mismatched laces, squeaked faintly against the worn floorboards as he clutched the microphone stand like a lifeline. The talent show was the annual highlight of Willow Creek, a place where farmers and factory workers gathered to escape the grind of daily life, dreaming of stars that seemed forever out of reach. Elias's mother had signed him up weeks before her final breath escaped in the sterile hush of the county hospital, her frail hand pressing a crumpled flyer into his palm. "Sing for me, my little nightingale," she'd whispered, her voice a threadbare melody against the beeping machines. Now, alone in the world except for his grandmother's quiet encouragement from the back row, Elias felt the spotlight's heat like a judgment. The judges, 3 locals with clipboards and skeptical smiles, leaned forward, murmuring about the next act's potential. The audience, a sea of familiar faces etched with curiosity and faint boredom, shifted in their plastic seats, programs rustling like dry leaves. Elias's heart hammered a frantic rhythm, each beat echoing the loss that gnawed at his chest. He adjusted the mic, his small fingers trembling, and cleared his throat, the sound swallowed by the expectant silence. What came next would not be a performance, it would be a unraveling, a soul laid bare under the unforgiving lights. As the piano accompaniment began, a soft, hesitant arpeggio from Mrs. Hargrove, the retired music teacher, he closed his eyes and let the first note escape, fragile as a soap bubble, carrying with it the ache of empty mornings and silent suppers. The room held its breath, unaware that this boy's voice would soon command not applause, but a profound, aching quiet. Elias sang of rivers that ran dry, of skies that wept without end, words he'd pieced together from his mother's lullabies and the hymns they'd shared in the little white church on Elm Street. His tone was raw, unpolished, cracking on the high notes like thin ice underfoot, yet it pierced the air with an authenticity that no trained vocalist could feign. The judges' pens hovered, forgotten, a mother in the third row clutched her husband's hand, her eyes glistening as memories of her own hardships surfaced unbidden. Elias's voice rose and fell, weaving through the melody like smoke from a dying fire, each phrase heavy with the grief of a child who had learned too soon that joy was a fleeting visitor. He poured out the story of watching his mother fade, her laughter turning to coughs that rattled like autumn leaves in wind, her stories of distant travels now echoes in an empty bedroom. The song shifted, verses tumbling into choruses that spoke of hope's fragile spark amid despair's shadow, his timbre shifting from whisper to wail, drawing the listeners into the intimate theater of his pain. In that moment, the stage was no longer a platform for entertainment but a confessional, and Elias, unwittingly, the priest absolving them of their own unspoken sorrows. The accompaniment faltered once, Mrs. Hargrove's fingers slipping on the keys, caught in the emotional current, but Elias pressed on, his voice a beacon in the gathering storm of silence. Whispers died in throats, coughs were stifled, even the creak of a settling beam overhead seemed to pause in reverence. As the final note lingered, a high, sustained plea that trembled into nothingness, the theater was enveloped in a hush so deep it felt like the world had paused to listen. Elias opened his eyes to faces frozen in quiet awe, tears tracing silent paths down cheeks weathered by time and trial. No one moved. The silence was a tribute, heavier than any ovation, wrapping around him like the mother's embrace he craved. In that eternal second, the boy's heartbreaking voice had turned the stage silent, not out of shock, but out of shared humanity's profound recognition. 1987 characters. Backstage, in the cluttered wings where props gathered dust and costumes hung like ghosts, Elias had rehearsed for hours under his grandmother's watchful gaze. Nana Rose, with her silver hair pinned in a bun and hands calloused from years of mending nets at the lakeside cannery, sat on a rickety stool, her Bible open but unread on her lap. "Let it out, child," she'd say, her voice gravelly from chain-smoking camels, "the good Lord gave you that gift to heal what's broken." Elias would nod, throat tight, and begin again, the notes spilling forth like confessions in the dim bulb's yellow light. His mother's passing had left a void that echoed in every corner of their modest bungalow on the edge of town, where wildflowers pushed through cracked sidewalks and the neighbor's dog howled at passing trains. Cancer, the doctors had said, stage 4, aggressive as a summer storm, stealing her vibrancy in months what should have taken years. Elias remembered the nights he'd sat by her bed, holding her hand as she drifted in and out of morphine dreams, singing snippets of old folk tunes to chase away the shadows. "You're my anchor, Eli," she'd murmur, eyes fluttering like moth wings, "don't let the waves take you under." Those words fueled his resolve now, as he stood before the mirror smeared with fingerprints, practicing his stance, willing his knees not to buckle. The talent show wasn't just a whim, it was a promise, a way to keep her spirit alive in the notes that danced from his lips. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the theater's windows, carrying scents of bonfires and fallen leaves, a reminder that change was inevitable, yet memory could endure. Elias's classmates had teased him for entering "freaky voice kid," they'd jeer in the schoolyard, kicking gravel at his feet, but he pressed on, driven by a fire that burned brighter than their mockery. On the night of the show, as the opening acts paraded their polished routines, tap dancers with shiny shoes, jugglers with colorful pins, Elias waited, palms slick with sweat, part a wild bird in his ribcage. The MC, Mr. Wilkins with his booming baritone and ill-fitting tuxedo, announced him with a flourish, "Next, from Willow Creek Elementary, Elias Thorne." The applause was polite, scattered, as he shuffled center stage, the lights blinding like accusations. But as the music swelled, something shifted within him, the fear melted into resolve, and his voice emerged not as a boy's falter, but as a man's lament, rich with the timbre of trials endured. The audience, initially distracted by crinkling candy wrappers and fidgeting children, found themselves drawn inexorably in, the lyrics wrapping around their souls like vines. One judge, Mrs. Ellis, a stern librarian who'd shushed 1,000 whispers, felt her clipboard slip from numb fingers, clattering softly to the floor, a sound swallowed by the ensuing quiet. Elias sang of bridges burned and paths diverged, metaphors born from his own fractured life, each line a brushstroke painting the portrait of resilience amid ruin. His pitch wavered not from weakness, but from the depth of emotion, rising to crescendos that evoked thunder over the lake, falling to whispers that mimicked the rustle of pages in a forgotten diary. In the balcony, old Mr. Harlan, veteran of 2 wars and bearer of unseen scars, wiped his eyes with a callous thumb, the song stirring ghosts he'd long buried. The silence that followed was not empty, it was pregnant with empathy, a collective holding of breath as if to preserve the fragility of the moment. Elias stood there, chest heaving, the mic humming faintly in his grip, as the weight of their unspoken gratitude settled upon him like a benediction. In that theater, under the vaulted ceiling painted with faded stars, a boy's voice had woven a tapestry of sorrow and strength, silencing the stage and awakening hearts long lulled to indifference. The aftermath would ripple through Willow Creek like a stone skipped across still water, but for now, in the hush, there was only connection, raw and real. 1992 characters. The song Elias chose was Whispers on the Wind, an obscure folk ballad his mother had loved, its origins lost to time but its lyrics etched into his memory like engravings on a locket. Composed by some wandering minstrel decades ago, it told of love lost to the sea, of a fisherman's widow waiting for sails that never returned, themes that mirrored his own sea of grief. He'd adapted the verses subtly, infusing them with personal echoes, replacing salty waves with hospital haze, distant shores with empty chairs, making it his own without altering the haunting melody. Rehearsals in the backyard, under the sycamore tree where his mother once hung a tire swing, had been his sanctuary, the branches swayed like an audience, leaves applauding in the breeze. Nana Rose would hum along from the porch, her rocking chair creaking a counterpoint, offering nods of approval that meant more than any trophy. On stage, as the piano's chords cascaded like gentle rain, Elias surrendered to the music, his voice unfolding pedal by pedal, each revelation more vulnerable than the last. The theater's acoustics, generous despite its age, amplified his timbre, carrying it to the farthest seats where elderly couples sat hand in hand, their whispers ceasing as the narrative gripped them. A young girl in pigtails, who'd been twirling her program, froze mid-motion, her wide eyes reflecting the boy's earnest face. The judges exchanged glances, their initial skepticism dissolving into something softer, more human. Mr. Patel, a hardware store owner, recalled his own son's battle with illness, the song reopening healed over wounds. Elias's delivery was instinctive, no sheet music needed, his body swaying slightly as if the notes pulled him like tides. He hit the bridge with a purity that bordered on ethereal, his voice soaring above the accompaniment, evoking images of open fields and starlit vigils. Tears welled unbidden in the front row, where the mayor's wife dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the fabric blurring in her vision. The silence that descended was multifaceted, shock at the raw talent, sorrow for the evident pain, admiration for the courage it took to bear such a soul. No one dared applaud immediately, it felt profane, like clapping at a funeral. Instead, they sat in communal reverence, the air thick with the residue of emotion, as if the boy's voice had exhaled a mist that clung to every surface. Elias, sensing the shift, lowered the mic slowly, his cheeks flushed, breath coming in shallow gasps. In that suspended moment, the stage, littered with confetti from prior acts, transformed into sacred ground, the boys' heartbreak the altar upon which they all knelt. Whispers began to stir, not of critique but of wonder. Did you hear that? Poor kid, what he's been through. The MC, throat tight, fumbled for words, finally managing it choked. Elias Thorne, ladies and gentlemen. Scattered claps grew to a wave, but the true power lingered in the silence preceding it, a void filled with the echoes of a voice that had touched the untouchable. As Elias bowed awkwardly, stepping back into the shadows, the audience remained seated a beat longer, unwilling to shatter the spell. Outside, the night air would carry tales of that performance, but inside, the silence spoke volumes, a testament to art's power to bridge the unbridgeable. Elias's grandmother rose then, her applause thunderous, pride swelling her frail frame, knowing her daughter's legacy lived on in that timbre. The boy's voice, heartbreaking in its honesty, had not just silenced the stage, it had quieted the noise of lives half-lived, inviting reflection in the gentle aftermath. 1985 characters. Willow Creek was a town stitched together by routines as predictable as the sunrise over the grain silos, mornings of coffee at the diner, afternoons of labor under relentless sun, evenings of porch swings and fireflies. Change came slow, like sap from a maple, but Elias's performance cracked that stasis, sending ripples through the community like a pebble in a pond. The next day, at the breakfast counter of Mabel's diner, farmers in flannel disgusted over eggs and bacon, their forks pausing mid-air as they recounted the hush that followed his final note. Boy sang like his heart was breaking wide open, old Tom Jenkins muttered, swirling his coffee, eyes distant with recalled emotion. School buzzed with it too, classmates who once scoffed now approached Elias in the hallway, mumbling awkward compliments, their tough facades cracking under the weight of newfound respect. Teachers wove his story into lessons, impromptu discussions on resilience blooming in English class, where poems of loss were read with fresh gravity. The local paper, the Willow Gazette, ran a front-page feature, photographer capturing Elias midnote in black and white glory, headline screaming voice of an angel silences the crowd. Interviews trickled in radio spots where Elias stammered through questions, his voice still carrying that haunting lilt, drawing calls from distant stations. Nana Rose fielded most, her pride a shield against the spotlight's glare, reminding him, it's not about fame, Eli, it's about healing. Yet offers came, scholarships to music camps, invitations to regional showcases, whispers of scouts from the city. Elias navigated it all with wide-eyed caution, his world expanding beyond the town's borders, yet anchored by the memories that fueled his song. Evenings found him by the lake, skipping stones into the glassy water, humming variations on the melody, the water's reply a soft lap against the shore. The silence of the stage had evolved into a quieter one in his daily life, a piece born from expression, where words failed but music bridged. Neighbors dropped by with pies and prayers, sharing their own tales of sorrow, lost jobs, wayward children, battles with illness, finding solace in his story's mirror. The theater, once a venue for light-hearted diversion, now held an aura of profundity, posters of the show lingering on walls like talismans. Elias returned once, slipping in during a matinee, watching from the shadows as new acts performed, his presence a subtle inspiration. The judges, reformed in their judgments, sought him out for advice, their clipboards now tools for encouragement rather than critique. In the fabric of Willow Creek, threads of isolation unraveled, woven anew by the boy's vulnerability, fostering connections forged in empathy's fire. His voice, once a solitary cry, echoed in conversations, songs hummed in kitchens, lullabies sung to grandchildren. The heartbreaking timbre that had stunned the stage became a catalyst, turning personal pain into communal strength, proving that from silence, understanding blooms. As winter dusted the town in frost, Elias stood taller, his steps lighter, the weight of grief transmuted into grace. The stage's quiet had been but the beginning, its true legacy unfolded in the lives it touched, a symphony of quiet revolutions sparked by one boy's unfiltered song. Friends emerged from unlikely places, a shy girl from art class who sketched his portrait, a bully who confessed his father's absence over recess punch. Elias listened, his own story a key unlocking others, the cycle of sharing mending frayed edges. In board meetings at the town hall, his performance was cited as a model for youth programs, budgets shifting toward arts and counseling. The silence, once a momentary veil, lingered as a philosophy. Sometimes, the deepest impact needs no sound. Elias embraced it, his journal filling with new lyrics, verses of gratitude amid the ache. The town's heart, once beating to the drum of endurance alone, now pulsed with harmony, all thanks to that fateful night when a boy's voice turned the stage and perhaps a corner of the world profoundly silent. 1998 characters. Beyond the immediate glow of acclaim, Elias grappled with the shadows that fame's flicker cast. Nights brought dreams where his mother's face blurred into the spotlight's glare, waking him with a start, sheets tangled like restraints. He'd tiptoe to the kitchen, where moonlight slanted through blinds, pouring milk into a glass that once held her favorite chamomile. Nana Rose, sensing his unrest, would join him, her slippers shuffling softly, sharing stories of her youth, dances in barns, letters from soldiers, losses that time softened but never erased. "Your voice is a bridge, Eli, not a burden," she'd say, her hand on his, calluses mapping maps of labor and love. School became a dual-edged sword, admiration swelled his circle, but envy nipped at heels, whispers of lucky break masking insecurities. The talent show's video, uploaded by a tech-savvy teen, went viral in pockets of the internet, comments flooding with hearts and prayers, strangers reaching across digital divides with words of kinship. Elias read them furtively, each one a bomb and a barb, reminding him of isolation's flip side, connection's overwhelming tide. He channeled it into songwriting, scribbling in margins of homework, melodies born from midnight musings. A local producer, hearing the buzz, offered studio time, his van idling outside their home like a promise on wheels. Elias hesitated, the mic in the booth a far cry from the theater's warmth, but stepped in, voice echoing off foam walls, raw and real. Tracks emerged, ballads of mending, anthems of ascent, each note a step toward reclaiming agency. Community stepped up too, fundraisers at the fire hall, jars of coins for lessons, volunteers teaching guitar under the sycamore. Elias's timbre deepened with practice, losing some fragility but gaining control, the heartbreak evolving into hope's undercurrent. Yet vulnerability lingered, surfacing in performances at church suppers, where eyes met his with knowing nods, the silence posts on a ritual now. He befriended the MC, Mr. Wilkins, who regaled him with tales of vaudeville days, mentoring with gentle humor. Summers brought camp, forests whispering secrets, campfires cradling confessions from peers with their own scars. Elias sang there, under canopies of stars, voices joining in chorus, the collective hush afterward a blanket of belonging. Back home, awards arrived, plaque from the state fair, invitation to governor's gala, but he cherished a drawing from the pigtail girl, her lines capturing his essence. The stage's silence had imprinted on him, teaching that power lies in pause, in the space between notes where truth resides. As he grew, so years layered upon Elias like sediment, transforming the boy into a man whose voice carried the patina of experience, rich as aged whiskey. Now in his 20s, with a beard shadowing his jaw and tattoos of musical staffs inking his forearms, he toured circuits from coast to coast, van rumbling with gear and ghosts. Stages varied to grand halls with chandeliers dripping light, dive bars with sticky floors and neon buzz, but the ritual endured, pre-show jitters quelled by deep breaths, post-performance silences savored as sacraments. Fans gathered, stories shared in green rooms, "Your song got me through chemo," or "That hush? It was my therapy." Elias listened, eyes crinkling in empathy, signing posters with lyrics as dedications. His discography swelled, live albums capturing raw edges, studio polish on heartbreak's airs, each release a chapter in autobiography. Collaborations deepened, duets with grizzled troubadours, features on indie darlings tracks, his timbre the anchor in experimental seas. Critics softened, praising evolution from raw wail to refined roar, retrospectives tracing roots to that fateful Willow Creek night. He revisited often, theater now a heritage site in local lore, guiding tours for aspiring artists, anecdotes flowing like rivers. Nana Rose's absence ached, but her spirit infused encores, audiences swaying to her favorites. Love found footing in Lena, a painter whose canvases bled emotion, their home aloft cluttered with easels and guitars, nights harmonizing over wine. Fatherhood dawned unexpectedly, a daughter, Mira, with his eyes in her mother's curls, her gurgles inspiring lullabies that silenced tantrums with sweetness. Diaper changes interspersed with deadlines, tours truncated for t-ball games, balance a dance of devotion. Philanthropy burgeoned, foundations funding music therapy for grieving youth, workshops in underfunded schools, his voice mentoring the voiceless. Media profiles proliferated, podcasts probing the silence's origin, documentaries filming the theater's ghosts. Awards escalated, Grammy nods, Hall of Fame whispers, but humility held, credits always to Community Cradle.
Challenges persisted, vocal nodes from overstrain, surgery silencing him temporarily, forcing reliance on words alone in journals and letters.
Recovery honed appreciation, return to stage met with roars that humbled. Global jaunts exposed culture's common chords, Tokyo cafes hushed by his folk, Berlin clubs pulsing to adapted blues, bridges built in ballads. Myra's first stage, a school play, echoed his debut, her pint-sized soliloquy drawing familial quiet, cycle renewing. Elias penned memoirs, silent stages, pages pulsing with prose poetic as song, bestseller status surprising. Retrospectives packed houses, medleys weaving decades, finales fading to that signature hush, lights dimming on held breaths. Legacy loomed, scholarships in his name, festivals bearing the tale, youth emulating the earnest tilt of his head. Romances with doubt ebbed, confidence cresting like choruses. In quiet codas, by Myra's bedside, he'd hum whispers, her tiny hand in his, the heartbreak transmuted to heritage. The boy's voice, once a startling solitude, matured into movement's motor, silencing stages not in sorrow, but in celebration's pause. Willow Creek's statue bronze boy at mic greeted travelers, plaque reading from heartbreak to harmony. Elias, passing, touched the shoulder, gratitude swelling. Life's score, complex and crescendoing, played on, his timbre the through line, turning every silence sacred. Mentors passed batons, Professor Lang retiring, toast to his growth, Mr. Wilkins gone, but jokes echoed in scripts. Friendships fortified, networks of nodes sharing nodes. In zeniths and nadirs, the core remained, vulnerability's valor, voice's vessel for veiled truths. Thus, the narrative arced, from stages hushed to world's whisper, a life's libretto in 8 movements profound. 1982 characters. Decades distilled Elias's essence into legend, his voice a vinyl groove etched in cultural canon, spins evoking eras with effortless grace. Now silver-threaded, with laugh lines mapping mirth amid melancholy, he headlined amphitheaters where constellations competed with spotlights, yet cherished intimacy of house concerts in borrowed living rooms. Mira, grown to composer with fire in her fingers, co-wrote albums blending generations, their harmonies a helix of heritage. Grandchildren clamored for tales of the silent stage, knees gathered on threadbare rugs, eyes wide as he spun yarns with vocal flourishes. Tours tempered by wisdom, fewer miles, deeper dives, setlists heavy on requests, encores extending the hush into horizons. Philanthropy peaked, academies rising in rural pockets, scholarships sprouting like wildflowers, his name synonymous with solace through song. Biopics brewed in Hollywood haze, scripts scrutinized for soul, Elias consulting to capture the crack in his first note. Critics' tomes dissected discographies, theses tracing timbre's trail from boyish break to bardic bum. Reunions in Willow Creek drew droves, theater expanded yet echoing origins, gala nights raising roofs with roof-raising roars. Lena's gallery shows intertwined paintings inspired by lyrics, auctions funding futures, art's alchemy in tandem. Health's harvest yielded cautious joys, vocal warm-ups ritualized, travels paced with pauses, life's ledger balanced in breaths. Doubts dissolved into doctrine, preached in keynotes at conferences, silence as the song's shadow, essential as sun. Collaborations circled globe, symphonies scoring his scores, world music fusions fraying borders. Myra's wedding waltz, his composition, hushed the hall in tears tide. Grandkids' debuts, recitals, open mics mirrored his, applause anticipated yet always astonishing. Memoirs sequels chronicled codas, hushes unheard, pages pondering posterity. Awards crested lifetime achievements, keys to cities, speeches succinct, credit in cradles. Legacies loom wove wide, curricula citing his catalyst, therapies tuned to his tracks, statues in squares saluting the silence. In repose, by lakeside cabins, he'd strum idly, waters whispering back, reflections rippling with reminiscence. The boy's heartbreaking voice, genesis of it all, endured in archives and airwaves, a beacon for broken dreamers. Stages, once silenced by shock, now bowed to his command, pauses planned as profundity. Willow Creek's heart, ever his, beat in biennial bashes, toasts to the timbre that turned tide. Elias, elder sage with youthful spark, mentored multitudes, voices kindled in his kiln. Love's ledger full family fractals, friendships fortified, sustained symphonies. In final fades, he'd reflect, from fragile note to fortified narrative, heartbreak's hush birthed harmony's host. The world, richer for his resonance, carried the quiet forward, a perpetual pause in praise. Thus, the script closes not with curtain, but with coda's calm,
the boy's voice eternal echo in silence's embrace.
1976 characters.